learned about Jennifer Laude through social media. I felt a connection to her as a Filipina trans woman.
Jennifer ang nickname doon, pero dito sa akin Ganda. Kasi nung maliit pa siya, sabi niya, maganda ako. Kaya paglaki niya, Ganda talaga ang tinawag ko.
JGP, isang transgender ang natagpuang patay kagabi sa Olongapo City. Isang dayuhan ang hinihinalang suspect sa pagpaslang.
Hi, everybody. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And you are very welcome to our YouTube channel, where we have conversations about culture, both popular and lived, in efforts to encourage a more empathetic and inclusive life. We're both social scientists and we have PhDs in culture, minds and sociology. Erin's is in anthropology and history. And all that means is that we're trained to see patterns of how humans behave, which is why we are firm believers in that nothing is new under the sun. And we have these conversations here on YouTube for a whole host of reasons, over a whole host of topics. Around here, you can find us talking about everything from a documentary about queer life in the Philippines, like we are today, to talking about what we really enjoyed about Falcon and Winter Soldier, which is coming up soon on the channel, and my deep, deep love of James Buchanan Barnes. We run the gamut because we can learn from all of culture. Now, Erin and I talk all the time, big fans of conversation. We turn on the recording devices for y'all because we really want to learn together as much as we can. So as you watch this video, whenever you are watching it, please comment below, and we would love for you to join our conversation.
We would indeed. This video is a part of our ongoing 2021, and potentially further than that, exploration of just how impactful, as a small word, colonization was around the world from varying perspectives, what it still looks like today, how it has shaped the cultural legacy of the places that were colonized, both by their cultural change and through the colonization of said place. For the month of June 2021, we are celebrating Pride all across our channels. And so we decided to take a break from looking at specific areas or colonizers and look more broadly at stories about global queer life. And that is what dictated the places we chose. So we found documentaries and then decided to learn more about them. So yesterday's video about the Philippines is because we chose today's film, Call Her Ganda, which is available on Amazon Prime. It's a 2017 film, and it is a documentary that tells the story of the murder of a trans woman in the Philippines, Jennifer Laude, by a U.S. serviceman, Joseph Pemberton. In the mid-2000s, I was unclear on the...
I thought it was like
2013, 14?
I thought it was like 13, 14. I thought we were like, we were firmly in Obama's second term.
That's what I meant when I said, I meant 2010s. They showed a lot of archival footage, but they weren't specific and I didn't look it up. But 2013, 2014, oh yeah, because Obama visits, that's right. And so we get the story of Jennifer's murder and the story of her family's, her mother's in particular's fight for justice. And really what this film is about is Jennifer's story, what it is like to be a trans sex worker, specifically in the Philippines, and also the legacy of the relationship, the ongoing relationship with the United States and the Philippines, the legacy of American imperialism and our country's insistence on, access, military access to pretty much anywhere we please. And the uniqueness of that story. And I think that really early on, it was great that Jennifer's mother's lawyer, the family lawyer, brought that up. And she said, you have to know about the relationship between the United States and the Philippines to understand this story. You can't just know that it was about the murder of a trans sex worker woman in the Philippines. So it was really layered, parts of it brilliantly done. We can go on artistically about whether we needed the story of Meredith, who is the Filipino American albino transgender journalist for BuzzFeed that does a lot of the legwork on this. She's a cool lady, but we're not sure we needed her transness inserted into this story artistically. But all the stuff about Jennifer and the relationship with the United States and imperialism, man, was it a great selection for our Colonizers World Tour. Dr. Kristen, what struck you about this documentary? What would you like to talk to our dear listeners about?
First of all, I am consistently curious about the particularities of trans folks as sex workers and what that lived experience must be like. And this was really driven home for me. This is like, if I could do another PhD, this is what I would do it on kind of thought process. This was really driven home for me when it turned out that Pemberton's defense was that he was so violated by Jennifer's male genitalia that he was therefore forced to strangle her to death out of self-defense, which is not how the human brain works. I can buy that he might have been shocked,
Upset,
might have been offended,
Sure.
might have even been disgusted. I will allow that feeling if it is shocking to you. It's like we talk a lot in The Handmaid's Tale about justifiable emotions versus justifiable actions.
Yeah.
So all of that I'll give him as authentic representations of what his reaction was that night, especially if they were drunk and or stoned, who knows. But this is a very present trope almost when we talk about sex work in Southeast Asia. The phrase lady boy is like, when we lived in Belfast, there was it was a traveling circus, and it was a show of the lady boys of Bangkok.
Yeah.
That was what it was called. And we had lengthy conversations about the appropriateness or inappropriateness of that word and what that meant and how we do it. And I'm just constantly curious about those particular dynamics and sex tourism, because we also need to say that one of the major reasons that places like Vietnam and Thailand and the Philippines and Indonesia have sex trades is because of military occupation and because of military activity. We know throughout history, this is the case everywhere where there are large groups of men, there are large groups of sex work, which that also counts the World Cup every year, by the way. Every 4 years, it means the Euro tournament is the same way. It means the Super Bowl for the NFL. That city always sees a spike in sex work where there are large groups of men. There are large groups of people providing sex work of all genders, sexualities, and body types.
Mm-hmm.
So that intersection is something I really wish that the documentary would have gone more into. I am sure that Meredith is a lovely person to have coffee with, but if I had to choose between a deeper investigation into that aspect of culture and Meredith reading me her work, I need to admit that I would have chosen the former.
Same days.
The other thing I want to really quickly talk about is the visiting forces agreement.
Oh.
Which is essentially like giving every US serviceman a diplomatic passport that they can do whatever they want and they'll be tried in US jail. And because of the way the US system is set up, I just don't see how we're going to really convict US servicemen for doing things to Indigenous folks. So Pemberton is the second US serviceman who was convicted of anything in the Philippines. The first one was in 2006, and it was a gentleman who was convicted of rape. And he was in custody for like 2 years, and then mysteriously the woman recanted her statement and he was set free. But the US has been in the Philippines since 1935, and that's the second conviction. The VFA was established in 1999 under President Bush, and how they kind of codified the particular relationship between the US and the Philippines. The Visiting Forces Agreement is a consistent evil in this documentary from the perspective of the Philippine lawyers, where essentially what that does is prevent any autonomy or dignity to the Filipino people, in terms of their own law and order.
Yeah, I think for me, that was what really struck me as well, because I am moderately familiar with the United States relationship with tribal sovereignty
Mm.
across the United States. And it struck me as very similar. And this question, this like larger existential question of whether the Filipino people really have sovereignty or really have independence, because they cannot prosecute US soldiers under Filipino law, or there are a lot of legal barriers to do it. It was very, very difficult to prosecute Pemberton. And it's very similar to the fact, you might not know this, but I'm going to tell you, surprise, federal law in the United States says that tribal law enforcement and courts cannot prosecute non-Indians who commit crimes on Indian land. They don't have the jurisdiction to do it. So if they get called for an example of an incident of rape or sexual assault by a person who is part of a mining camp in a fracking area on a reservation, tribal law enforcement cannot arrest that person. They cannot prosecute that person. They have to go to the nearest federal jurisdiction, which, depending on where you are in Indian country, is a very long way away. So this is part of the US policy in protecting United States citizens, even though technically Indian country people have citizenship as well, US citizenship, but it's this hierarchy of valuing human lives, and that the perspective was always on protecting Pemberton.
Yeah. And
It's
like
not
even in the media, I'll say, like when the New York Times covered this story, they were really clear to tell us how miserable the Filipino prison was. And I was like, I'm sure it is. Like,
sure it's not nice.
I'm sure it's not great. He murdered another human person.
Yeah.
Consequences have actions, kids.
Yeah, we all make choices. And if you guys know our channel at all, you know we talk a lot about assault and abuse and rape culture. We feel very strongly in talking about it and being open and explicit about it. And I mean, this documentary is a textbook case of what we mean when we say rape culture.
Mm-hmm.
And that the potential promising future of this young man was always from the perspective of a lot of media, from the US government, from the US military.
And a lot of Filipino citizens as well, we need to say.
And a lot of Filipino citizens, the potential promising future of this young man was worth more than the potential promising future of the young trans woman, Jennifer Laude, who was murdered. And you know, that was not the part of the documentary that surprised either Dr. Kristen or I, but it's always worth mentioning and saying out loud that we continue to value the lives of the perpetrators of sexual violence over their victims in all countries, cultures around the world.
There's a lot in this.
Oh, yes. We didn't even get to Duterte. Woo!
So since this documentary was filmed, Joseph Pemberton has actually been pardoned, full pardon. He did serve approximately 6 years of a 10-year sentence, and he was fully pardoned in September of 2020. And the kind of scuttlebutt that I read on Reddit was that it was done as a favor to Trump. I have no idea if that's true. The official reporting did not cover that. Duterte is very specific in his feelings about femininity and Filipino femininity, and that trans women are not in that category. And so there is speculation that he did this because he does not necessarily think Pemberton did anything wrong. There's a lot of mess here. But as of this speaking, Joseph Pemberton is home in the United States, and as far as we know, is back to residing in Massachusetts. The family of Jennifer Laude, of course, was not consulted in this if they felt that justice has been done, which is another difference with the US penal system, because if somebody was up for parole, potentially even sometimes pardon, not necessarily federal pardon, but like local pardon, the victims' families get a say.
Mm-hmm.
And at no point in time in this process, now Jennifer Laude's mother was allowed to make a victim impact statement in the court. But as far as I can tell from my research, and if someone is an expert on this watching this and you know differently, please correct me. It sounds like the pardon was all very back channel and not with the consent at all of Jennifer Laude's family. So there's a lot happening here.
Mhm.
There's a lot going on. At the center of it is the inexplicable and unspeakably tragic murder of a woman on the verge of a marriage and a new life. There's also the ongoing imperialism that the American government exercises wherever it so chooses.
Mm.
And then there's the constant reality that on this planet, we believe that the rape of women is excusable and sometimes even justifiable. If any of those things are surprising to you, we cannot recommend this enough because it lays out all of those things very well and explains them very, very well. In terms of an empathy build, please spend an hour and a half sitting with the story of this promising young woman and what happened when she said yes to the wrong serviceman. And how he was really never truly, to the full extent of even Philippine law, held accountable for his actions.
Mm. That is a wrap on the Philippines, the week 2 of our 4th chapter of the Colonizers World Tour. Week 3, we will be traveling back to Dr. Kristen's beloved continent of Africa, and we will be visiting Uganda for our 101 video, and our piece of art will be the film called Call Me Kuchu. So we're back-to-back Call Me weeks. Call Me weeks for our pieces of art. If we do not see you in other parts of our channel, we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.